So good morning, everybody. I'm still not certain what day it is, but I want to welcome you to another Earth to Class, and we're very pleased to have our friend Tom McGuire speaking to us today about off the beaten path, places he's visited in the American Southwest. We've just been having offline a chat about how wonderful it is to be retired, not having to worry about current teaching situations. So Renee and Chris, pay attention. Okay, Tom, take it away, please.
Okay, so this is a presentation. Some of you may remember those movies by John S. Shelton, and I had, you remember from the ESCP days, and I had the opportunity to meet John, which was wonderful. He's passed away, but I'm dedicating this to him from his wonderful books. Uh, this is not about the national parks. That's where everybody goes. These are going to be places that people generally don't go and people generally don't know about. And here's the reason we're not going to the national parks. Most of the slides are my own, but there's one, several of them are off the internet. They're credited down at the bottom of the URL. Okay, now we're on to mine. Now this is really off the beaten path. This is the switchbacks on the Burr Trail. You're looking at the Henry Mountains up there in the top, the last part of the continental United States, the contiguous United States, not to be mapped. And it's just a magnificent road in southern Utah and just a wonderful spot. And it is clearly off the beaten path. Where are we going to stay? Well, one possibility would be Bishop Castle, which is in Colorado. This guy built this magnificent castle, got into a lot of trouble with the National Forest because he was picking up rocks from the National Forest. And I relate to that. This is my front yard, no grass, zero scaping, and we've got just rocks from all over the Southwest. It's a great job of collecting the rocks. Now, where we're going to stay, if we want to be in luxury, is Amagiri. This is a satellite photo of a place in northern Arizona where there's a resort. And rooms here are $3,500 a night. There is no sign out on the main road. You have to know where Amagiri is. And it is a very high-end resort. So that's where we could stay. But more often I stay in a place like this. This is in back to southern Utah. Out here, you just take the cot out of the car and set it up next to the car, sleep under the stars. And it's just a great place to be. And then being there, you can get up in the morning and view the beautiful Circle Cliffs in that area of southern Utah. It's just a beautiful spot. Okay, so there's some really unusual place names in Arizona. Carefree is right next to us. You got Baghdad without an H, Sholo, Snowflake. Sholo is for a draw of cards where the low card wins. Of course, I lost my seat on the council because I showed the low card back in 2009, made the front page of the New York Times. Snowflake, Potato Patch, Three-Way, Tombstone, Bumblebee, Happy Jack. So the next slide, there is a sentence, why hope for nothing at Christmas? And the only two words there that are not places in Arizona are for and at. So let's look at why hope nothing in Christmas. And there they are. Y is where there's a Y in the road. Do you see a problem with the hope sign? I'm not sure I can. Do you see a problem with the hope sign? Okay, I can't hear you. Hope yours is
Yes,
obviously.
there's no apostrophe.
There's no apostrophe. Well, in Arizona, you don't need apostrophe, especially the way the schools are here. And then you've got nothing and you got Christmas mine. And this is where those four places are in Arizona. They're real locations in Arizona. Not much less than nothing. So I can't say there's nothing left, but that's all that's left now of nothing. It's on the main road going out to Las Vegas. So one of the places off the beaten path is Sheep Ridge. It's about a 3-hour drive from here. The last time I went there was with a friend in his Jeep. The last 12 miles, we averaged 8 miles an hour because this is what the road was like. So it's definitely off the beaten path. But Sheep Ridge was made in the 1940s in order to bring sheep across the Verde River to graze on the other side of the river. It was never made wide enough for an automobile to pass or a truck or a vehicle. But the bridge is still there. It's accessed by that horrible road that you saw. And actually, just downstream from the bridge, there's a ford. And the last time I was there were people whose car had to be towed out of the river because there was a little too much water in the river for them to get safely across. But it's a really cool place. The Verde River is a beautiful river. Not adjudicated, so who owns the water is very much in dispute. The next place is a mining town in the Bradshaw Mountains that are about 50 miles north of Cave Creek, and it's off Interstate 17, you see on the right there. The part that's in red is an old railroad grade that goes up to Crown King, and you see the switchbacks there. And the question is, how do you get a railroad up the switchbacks? Well, we'll get there in a moment. Okay, and this is the town of Bumblebee, as seen from the interstate at the rest stop. And downtown Bumblebee, not much to it, but this is downtown Bumblebee. We're on the road up to Crown King. It's a dirt road. It's about 30 miles by a fairly rough dirt road, but it's beautiful Arizona scenery, dusty, and the dust blows away and it leaves the places where there are road cuts, rock cuts exposed like this, and it makes the road kind of rough. And then you get to Cleator, and where I was, when I went into Cleator one time, I went into the bar there, you see in the middle of the picture, and I asked them, are you guys Republicans or Democrats? And the guy at the bar said, we don't believe in any of that shit. So that gives you an idea of Cleator. Coming in from the right there is the old railroad bed. And the road basically follows the railroad bed. This is looking from a mine up there in the Bradshaw. There's a lot of gold mines, silver mines in that area. The road cuts are extremely narrow because they were built not for cars. They were originally built for the train. So this is the train that was active, about 1900. And about the time they built the railroad, the gold mining went downhill. So the railroad had to be taken up. And the interesting question is, how do you get a railroad train around switchbacks? So you can see a switchback here up on the hill, most of the way up. You can see the same road as it goes further up. So the grade is easy, but the question is, how do you get a railroad train around switchbacks? And the answer is you don't. If you look at the two arrows on this is a satellite of the road, and the bottom right is the one that I just showed you. That switchback. And the way you do it is you make the train go into these little things on the end, and then it backs up. So it goes off there to the right, goes into that siding, whatever you want to call it, and then you back up the train for the next half mile or so and go into another one, you go forward again. So this is one of those sidings. So it's not a steep road going up to Crown King, but the switchbacks are really interesting. And that brings you into the town of Crown King at about 7,000 feet above sea level. It's off the beaten path because it's a rough road. Any car can do it, but you're going to get dusty and get a lot of corrugations for the last 30 miles. But it's cooler than Phoenix. And that's downtown Crown King. The population is somewhere around 110. And the saloon on the middle of the picture there has a great lunch. And the store sells wonderful homemade fudge. And you see a lot of people up there, go back, a lot of people up there are on ATVs because there are actually 5 ways to get up there. And the way we came up is by far the easiest. And not far from there is a little lake called Horse Thief Lake. And this was made as a resort for the city of Phoenix. Back before there was air conditioning, they would come up here and spend some time cooler up in the mountains. So when it was 110 degrees in Phoenix, it would be only 90 degrees up here and cooler at night. So it was a wonderful place, but a lot of people don't even know it's there. And near there is a Indian fortress, and you're looking out that line over on the right side is the interstate. So Bumblebee and the interstate are down there, but it's off the beaten path. It's a rough road to get up here, and it was a wonderful place. to camp out. There was one time here I had my portable TV that I could hook into my car cigarette lighter, and I could watch TV and see the lights of Phoenix down below. That was kind of cool. But there's my tent. No, I don't have a tent. I'm sleeping next to the car, but it was a great place. So there are quite a few ghost towns in Arizona. This is the ghost town of Tip Top. And it was a silver mining town. At one time, it was one of the most populous towns in Arizona because of the mining. And I want to direct your attention. Number 8 up at the top is spoils from one of the mines. And building number 3 down on the left is a building. I want you to keep an eye on that. And there's the building today, and there's the spoils and my trusty Subaru. Can't get in there anymore because the roads deteriorated so badly that 15 years ago I could take the car in there, and either because the road's gotten so bad or because I'm not as brave, as stupid as I used to be. The only way I could get in there now is by ATV with friend zone. And near there is the ghost town of Gillette. And this is where some of the workings for the mine, where they were processing some of the ore for the mine. So it's what's left of a ghost town. My favorite ghost town is Canyon Diablo. And Can Diablo, the ghost town exists because they were building this railroad bridge in, I think it was, let's see if I've got the information here, Tip Top, Gillette. 1880, originated in 1880, and took them 6 months to build the bridge. So while they were building the bridge, they made the town of Canyon Diablo. And this is the ghost town of Canyon Diablo. And it was a pretty wild place. The story was that one of the local sheriffs was appointed in the morning and they buried him that evening. So, maybe it was John Shaw. This is a holdup. So they're holding up the body of John Shaw, who was died in a shootout in 1905. Yeah, we do have holdups here. So, this is going back. I think this is a cistern, and this is all that's left of it. It's only about 5 miles off the interstate. It's a rough road getting there, but it's a really cool ghost town. Now they've redone the railroad, so the railroad goes through, and I'm sure people on the railroad have no idea the great ghost town they're just going past. You may have heard the Eagles taking it easy, and this is where they had standing on the corner in Winslow, Arizona. So in Winslow, they have this statue dedicated to the Eagles. It's really cool. Places up there on the Colorado Plateau have a tough time because the water table is way, way down, a mile or more below the surface. They have a tough time in bringing up water. And it may be salty water because there just isn't much rainfall. It's not far from the south rim of the Grand Canyon. And we actually have a ghost town here in Cave Creek. Renee may remember going out to this place. It's a Victorian house that was built by a friend out in the Sonoran Desert. And between where I'm standing and the house was the town of Liscum, which serviced people who were at the local Cave Creek mines. I mentioned that somebody found a couple of gold nuggets in that area a couple of years ago. He didn't say exactly where he was, but when the YouTube panned around, I knew exactly where the guy was. I went up there with my metal detector and came up with a few nails and bottle caps and pieces of fence, but I have yet to find any gold. You can see that this is a container for cyanide in the middle of the picture. And the Faraday, the JK Fairbanks, CK Fairbanks was active about 1900. So you can date the ghost town based upon the trash that was picked up there. There's some great waterfalls in Arizona. This is the Grand Falls of the Little Colorado River. And the reason that the falls is here is that the Little Colorado, which only runs, when there's rain up around petrified forest and the Painted Desert, it had created a canyon, and the canyon got filled in from lava flows from over near the San Francisco Peaks. So that rerouted the Little Colorado River, and then when it went back into its own canyon, it made this great waterfall. And when the water is running, that's what was my next door neighbor, Mike, good guy, standing up there at that little kiosk up at the top. When the water's running, it's phenomenal. And it's almost exactly the same height as Niagara Falls. but it's only running like this very briefly. You have to get up there when it's running, and it's off the beaten path. And now I'm told that there is no public access. Apparently, there's been some vandalism down there. There's nobody there to guard the place. So it's on the Navajo reservation, and they're no longer allowing public access. You may have seen pictures of Mooney Falls and Havasu Falls in the Grand Canyon, halfway down the Grand Canyon. The water has a beautiful blue color because it's coming out of limestone. And they've had some tremendous floods there. But it's a beautiful waterfall. You know, in the desert, you don't tend to think of waterfalls. And this is actually water that comes out of springs about 5 miles up. And there's a Native American village there, Havasu. And we walked in. It was about 10 miles. And they have a helicopter, but the rule is if the Native Americans want to ride on the helicopter, you get bumped. They've got first priority because this is their reservation, their little villages down there. And this one is in southern Utah. This is Calf Creek Falls, and that water was cold. That guy down below was really brave to be in that water, but it's about a 2 or 3 mile hike up the road, so that's clearly off the beaten path. And another great waterfall is Deer Creek Falls, which comes into the Colorado River. You can walk down there. A friend of mine just did it. He said he ran out of water on that trip, several-day trip, and just barely made it back alive. But the better way is to go down the Colorado River, and they often stop here at Deer Creek Falls. It's just a beautiful waterfall. And once again, it's spring-fed. This is not water coming off the plateau. This is water coming out of springs. And we have a waterfall here in Arizona. Renee, did we walk down to this waterfall when you were here?
I don't believe that we did.
Okay, well, come back and we will do this. This is not far from Cave Creek. It's the only waterfall I know of in the Cave Creek area. And it's
One
a
of these
gorgeous
days.
waterfall. Pardon?
One of these days.
One of these days, any of you, come on out to Cave Creek and walk there. This used to be to go year round. In the last year or two, it has dried up in autumn, but it may be going now again. It's spring fed, and they've had some amazing floods that went through here that just destroyed this area. There's a picture that I've got on Earth Science Picture of the Day that has to do with this flood coming down here, and it probably had as much water as was going on the Grand Canyon. On the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon, briefly in flood, destroyed a number of homes upstream. So speaking of the Grand Canyon, this is my favorite view on the rim. This is Mary Coulter's Tower Desert View. You can see the river down there. Hance Rapids is down there. And then looking out over the Colorado Plateau on the horizon off to the right is the western extension of the Painted Desert. And the Navajo Reservation is over in that area. So that's the best, I think, the best view. And you can see there's some snow. So this was in winter up there on the rim of the Grand Canyon. But my favorite views are down at different places that are harder to get to. Elaine and I have rafted the Grand Canyon half a dozen times. And it's really cool to do that. The water is really cold. But if you go in May, you're probably not going to get rainstorms from the monsoons. And the river tends to be very clean. So May is the time to do it. If you go in June and July, it's hot as hell and the water is cold as hell. So, between the two, it's very comfortable. So this is the granaries at Nankoweap. Gorgeous place there. Up on the right, you can see kind of a rectangular window where the Native Americans stored their grain, probably to avoid their being raided by other Indians. And the Colorado River meanders back and forth among these alluvial fans coming into the river. And somewhere down there is the raft that we came on. And then we walked up to the granaries. Beautiful walk, gorgeous view of the Grand Canyon. Now, between there and the next stop, we come back to the Little Colorado River. When it is not flowing up at the falls, it's coming out of springs, and those springs are coming out of limestone. So that's why you've got that powder blue color. And the river off to the right, probably that water is in the 50s, if you're lucky. But the water coming in on the left, the blue water, is probably in the 70s. So, that makes for nice swimming and tubing down the river. But the only way to get there is to go down the Colorado River. there has been talk about getting some kind of resort down here where you come down from the rim. And I think the Navajo people have really put the kibosh on that. They just do not want this commercialized. And that's kind of cool. So it's definitely off the beaten path. Further down the river, you have Vulcan's Anvil, which is an intrusion of ultramafic lava. At one time, these lava flows actually backed up the Grand Canyon. They backed up the Colorado River for 100 miles or more. And now there's not much left of those lava flows at this point. But the view to see it, the best view is from up on top of the canyon. It's about a 50-mile road, really rough dirt road. To get in there, you wouldn't want to take a regular vehicle. And you're looking almost straight down. You can see a couple of white spots over there on the left, and those are rafts approaching that. And notice that the river is brown in color because this was taken in the summer when side streams are bringing in muddy water, especially the Paria River. They bring in a lot of water. And this is me sitting there up at the top of the Toro Week outlook. I would not sit there again today, but it's a phenomenal view of the Grand Canyon. Absolutely phenomenal, off the beaten path. This is a story. The greatest single loss of life in the settling of the American Southwest occurred here at Mountain Meadows, and it was during the Mormon War. And the Mormons did not want to be a part of the United States, in part because they were practicing polygamy. So there was a group of settlers from Arkansas who came through, and the Mormons would not sell them supplies because they were pissed off at the US government. And they got down to this place and they got attacked by Paiute Indians. But most of the Paiute Indians were followers of Brigham Young. They were Mormons, and they circled the wagons, and they had the men come out and they slaughtered them. They had the women came out, they slaughtered the women, the Mormons. The children came out, and if they were young enough, they raised them as good Mormons. True story. And one of the leaders of that was John Doyle Lee. And so they blamed it to him, sent him down to the Colorado River to a place that's known as Lee's Ferry. And it was here that he would take people across the Colorado River. Road came in from the right, that's a modern paved road, and it would go up that ramp off to the left. So they banished him down there. I think it was with his 15th wife that he went down there. And this is where John D. Lee had his settlement down there so he could take people across the river that got sent down there by Brigham Young as punishment for the 100 people or so that were murdered up at Mountain Meadows. And that wasn't good enough. The federal government said, no, you got to do better than that. So Brigham Young called him back up to Cedar City, and they sat him down next to his coffin and executed him. And his last words were, I do not believe everything that is now being taught and practiced by Brigham Young. I do not care who hears it. It is my last word. I have been sacrificed in a cowardly and dastardly manner. And then they shot him and they put him in his coffin and blamed him for what had happened. Now that's not a very pleasant story about the Mormon church. And frankly, they tried to cover that up for a long time.
Tom, if I could just pop in here for a moment.
Yes.
Sam Clemens was in the American Southwest in the 1860s and 50s. And he later on wrote a book called Roughing It about his experiences. And he went through a lot of newspaper reports and has an appendix in Roughing It about the Meadows Massacre.
Yeah. John Krakauer has a book. I think it's called Under the Banner of Heaven, I think it's called. And he talks about it. And, the Mormons have phenomenal records of history, and they have the record of the whole thing, but they really tried to cover it up. And you can tell why. I mean, the modern Mormons, there are few of them that are polygamists living rurally. And actually, polygamy is not really much of a problem. The problem is that they get welfare on those kids they have with the multiple wives, and that's welfare fraud because they're living in the polygamous place. And they get money for their local school and spend it on an airplane because they don't want to follow the state standards for education, and they have their own ideas in the polygamous community. That's gotten better in the last few years. They caught Warren Jeffs. I think he's now in jail for child abuse because there was a practice, and I think it was true, where the men would break in their daughters for marriage, and you can imagine what that meant. So, yeah, that was not very good. You'll see a better story about the Mormons coming up. Southern Utah is the location of the Escalante Grand Staircase National Monument, one of my favorite places. And here's the Grand Staircase. You have the chocolate cliffs, the vermilion cliffs, the white cliffs, the gray cliffs, and the pink cliffs. So that is the Grand Staircase going up to a higher part of the Colorado Plateau. Up on top there is Bryce Canyon. And Powell Point is one of the places up there in the pink cliffs. Just a gorgeous place. You got some slick rock down on the bottom there. Slick rock in the sense that if you tried taking a wagon over it with metal wheels, it's slick. If you rub it with your hand, it's sandy. But it was tough getting a wagon over there. And they're Moki marbles. And Moki marbles are concretions, natural concretions. This is not a well-known location. And I suppose if it were, people would probably pick up these things, but they're, the size of a golf ball to a tennis ball. And they're really amazing concretions. And these are concretions, at least most of these are from Navajo sandstone up there in the Colorado Plateau. And there are a number of places. I've brought home a big rock of one of these that I have in my collection out in the driveway. There are a lot of deformations on the Colorado Plateau, things called monoclines, not exactly a syncline or an anticline, but it's a compressional structure. This one's called Rapley Ridge, and it's near Mexican Hat, Utah. And the reason that it happened is the Farallon plate is going underneath the North American plate and pushing up the Colorado Plateau. So for a long time, they couldn't figure out why the Colorado Plateau was at a high elevation. And it was because of subduction and pushing up. There's also the volcanoes that came up here, illustrated in this diagram. And the compression is causing the folds. So you get these effects from the plate tectonic movements. The vertical lines, the north-south lines here, this is on the border on the top left is Utah, Colorado, on the right, New Mexico down right, and then down on the left is Arizona. And these are all those kinds of compressional monoclines. Some of them probably are synclines and anticlines, but most of them are monoclines. And this is a water pocket fold, and it's one of them is the south remote end of Capitol Reef National Park. Absolutely beautiful structure. So it's flat up on top, and then you got this place where it is bent at close to 45 degrees, and then where I'm standing, the rocks are horizontal. So it's obviously plate tectonic induced horizontal structure. How many of you have seen pictures of this location? I don't hear your response. It's an amazing location in southern Utah, and that's the Coxcomb Fold, and the road goes through there, and it's just a beautiful road. Stopped there a number of times, and this year I got my best picture of it. It was nice sky conditions, a truck going through, and what amazing structure. It's just one of the most amazing places. And near there is a place now called Yellow Rock. It's quite a climb to get up there, but this is the natural color of the Navajo sandstone in that location. I have a book of places on the Colorado Plateau. It gives you enough information to get into trouble and not enough information to get you out of trouble. And I've just been lucky to get out of trouble. Some of you may have seen pictures of the goosenecks of the San Juan. And here we're looking at a satellite view. Let's see, the picture of Rapley Syncline is just off the satellite view to the right. And if you stand where that green marker is, you get the view that we see at the bottom. And that's a span of almost 100, well, maybe 180 degrees and it's taken from where the green place is. And you on the bottom one, you got 1, 2, 3, 4 bends of the Colorado River, and that's what you see from that place at ground level. It's really an amazing place. And maybe you've seen pictures of that. I think John Shelton took some of those. So let's go down Hole in the Rock Road. Again, we're in southern Utah, the Grand Staircase, and there's a place called Devil's Garden, and this is a natural arch that's there. Not all that attractive, but it's really quite a structure. My favorite is Metate Arch, and it's about 30 miles down a rough dirt road, but it's great. And as a matter of fact, the AGI thought it was so good they bought my picture. So that's my photograph on the left, and over on the right is the glossary of geology, and the front cover there is a picture that I took here at Metate Arch. Another arch that's this one is along the road near where we saw that structure and the vehicle. This is called Grosvenor Arch, named after the founders of National Geographic Society. And again, it's many miles on a rough dirt road to get there. It's actually a double arch. So, you know, really interesting structure. Like almost all the pictures here, these are my own photographs. This is a place where I went in eastern Utah called Gold Butte. And it is just a long way from anywhere. And I was camping next to the car, walked around the little hill, and came upon this arch within an arch. It has no name. I don't know how many people have ever seen it, but it was a wonderful discovery there up on the Colorado Plateau. You've probably seen pictures of Antelope Slot Canyon. It's used a lot in movies. I think Star Wars used it. Upper Antelope is where most people go. This is Lower Antelope Slot Canyon. You can actually walk through this. It's on the Navajo Reservation, and this is a public slot canyon. But there are a lot of remote slot canyons that I just think are great. Now, up at the top of the picture, you can see kind of a dark area, and then over on the right, you have a dark area, and then you have the cleft in the bottom. Those are all a part of Peekaboo Slot Canyon, which is a phenomenal slot canyon. And this is a picture that I took inside there. These guys were taking pictures, and I asked, can I take one too? And they said, well, we'll let you do it, but you can't sell the picture, because they were professional photographers. They're wonderful in allowing me to take the picture there in Peekaboo Slot Canyon. You see how it loops over the top. So this particular slot canyon actually has a place where it is completely closed in 360 degrees for a short distance. That's quite a slot canyon. And that's me standing at the top of that canyon. Now, this is another place that I would not go to today. I would not do that today, because that's a deep canyon below where I'm standing. Next to that is Spooky Slot Canyon. We went there. Elaine had her camelback that she was wearing, and I told her, well, you can't wear that in there. She said, well, I need the water. And yeah, take it in there, but you're going to have to take it off, because there's no way you could wear a backpack or a camelback going 50 yards or so through a narrow thing like this. This is my friend Chip Beal. He used to fill in once in a while for Alex Trebek on Jeopardy. And back to Hole in the Rock Road. And this is a road that was taken by a group of 250 Mormons back in 1880. And they were told by Brigham Young, you will populate the San Juan River. And the explored routes were hundreds of miles, and they decided they were going to go as the crow flies and do a shortcut. And this part of it was pretty good. I mean, there wasn't a road there, at least not a road like this. They had the wagons, and they had horses, and they had cattle, and 250 people, and came to a Hole in the Rock. And down, that's Lake Powell down there. So a couple of 100 feet under that water was the Colorado River. And they needed to cross the Colorado. They got down to the end of the plateau, and this is what they were facing. And with wagons and people and cattle and horses, how the hell are you going to get down a crack like that? And so they spent a while at Dance Hall Rock, which is near there. Those structures up on the top are called Tafoni, and they're common throughout the Colorado Plateau. And there's a famous quote, stick to, and one of the people was a European Mormon, and that meant stick to the plan. We're just going to go for it, and we're going to make our way down across the river and on the rest of the way to the San Juan. And they did it. And here's how they did it. I mean, the horses wouldn't go down, so they put blinders on the first wagon of horses, and the horses would go down it with blinders, and then the other horses would follow. But it was extremely steep, and this is how they had to get down to the river. This was after they had spent months with chisels, and I think they had a little bit of black powder, and they had chiseled their way on this passage down hole in the rock to get to the river. And they actually arrived at the San Juan. They got down to Bluff and they said, we ain't going no further than this. This was just one hell of an expedition. They left Escalante with 250 people, and they arrived at Bluff with 253. How did they end up with more people than they started? Question for you guys. Anybody?
Some aliens joined them.
Babies. There were 3 babies that were born along the way. So, this is the other side of the Mormon dedication. When Brigham Young said, you will go there, they went there. And it was just an amazing hole in the rock expedition. Look it up. It's that's the other side of LDS. Here's another slot canyon. Elaine is actually standing at the top of the slot canyon. You can see a rock outcrop down there on the left, and that's the top of the canyon. And to get the road across here, they rolled boulders into the top of the canyon. The boulders got caught. They couldn't get down through the canyon. They built a road across the boulders. So where Elaine is standing, a couple of 100 feet below her, is the bottom of the slot canyon. And that's my friend looking up immediately below where Elaine is standing. Now, about 2/3 of the way up, you can see a little circle. And that little circle is a wheel. And it's the wheel of a vehicle. And in the 1950s, there were some guys that went across that road that was the dirt road going across the canyon. You can see how the rocks got caught there at the top. And their brakes weren't working very well. And 3 of them were in this vehicle when it ran into the top of Bowl Canyon. And they were killed. They had to get the bodies out, but the vehicle was still there. But Bull Valley Canyon, that is an amazing slot canyon. And it's no fun anymore. Just within the last few years, they built this concrete bridge going across there. But when I first went there, the road was like that. Okay, and now they've put in the concrete bridge, spoiled all the fun. But you can still stand on the bridge and look down and see the crushed truck down there high above the bottom of the canyon. You can see the structure of the bridge there on the right side of this picture. I've discovered some slot canyons not far from Cave Creek. There was a road going across the top. They've changed it into the Maricopa Trail, and it circles the Phoenix Valley. It's about 300 miles long, recently dedicated. And this is one of the remote parts of the valley that circles the Maricopa Valley. Maricopa Trail circles the valley, and at this point it goes through a slot canyon. The other slot canyons were in sandstone on the Colorado Plateau. I think this is a volcanic breccia that you're looking at here. Bryce would know that, right, Bryce? And this is more than volcanic breccia. This is a slot canyon that I discovered. The story is interesting. I went down to the dam at Bartlett Lake and continued on and got to the bottom of Indian Springs Wash. Decided I'd walk up the wash to see if I could get back to the road up at the top, and found a place where I couldn't get through because of weeds, but it was easy to go off to the right and brought into the slot canyon, and you end up at a gigantic dry waterfall. So the next time I went back, you couldn't get down there to below the dam because of eagle nesting. So I started at the top and got down, eventually made it all the way down near the river and couldn't figure out where this was. and didn't realize when I went there, I was actually in a side canyon. So this is called Bootleg Slot Canyon. It's an amazing slot canyon. Uh, the northern part of Cave Creek, we have the Spur Cross Ranch Conservation Area. And the name Spur Cross comes from the cattle brand. It's like the spur on your boot, and then it's got a cross, and that's where the name comes from. And there's this cute little slot canyon. I think this is a volcanic tuff that it's in, and really cute little canyon. It's off trail, but as a volunteer in the conservation area, I get to go pretty much wherever I want. So, we have our own little slot canyon. So we're going to see some unusual sights, and we're back to the Escalante Grand Staircase, second largest display of petrified wood. And it's about a mile off of the road, not far from that camping spot where you saw me getting up at first light in the morning. And, it's in the books, and there's nobody there because it's hard to get to. But these gigantic petrified logs, there you see a cross section of one of those logs. And I have picked up some petrified wood, but I wouldn't do it at a place like this because, this is clearly a protected place. But in one of those petrified logs, you got this growth of crystals. And I'm pretty sure those are quartz crystals discolored by probably some kind of metallic oxide. And I can't see a hexagonal form to those crystals. Bryce, would quartz sometimes create a different shape of crystal than hexagonal?
No, no, but I'm not surprised. Often you get some sort of bruisey coating on the crystals, and
So maybe we're looking at the top of the hexagonal crystals.
I think
Yeah,
I mean, it
good
looks obviously I'm not there, but it looks like the pyramidal terminations.
Well, Bryce, you're going to have to come, and we'll go there. And down at the bottom, we've got these radial forms. And I don't, Bryce, what's that?
Where's that? Here,
The
this?
radial forms down in the bottom left.
And I have no idea.
That's when Bryce says, "I have no idea." It's pretty obscure. There's a reason that Syracuse University hired him years ago. One of the other roads in Grand Staircase National Monument is the Smoky Mountain Road. And that's a 50-mile road going from Lake Powell up to the area around Bryce Canyon. You can see it looping up the grade there. And it's a rough road. This is, I think, the first time I did the Smoky Mountain Road, and managed to get through. There'd been a flood recently, and flooded across this part of the road, deposited material. Somehow people had gotten through. And so I got this is the road, got the Subaru in there and managed to get through. On Smoky Mountain Road, there's just some amazing scenery there. You can see my car over on the left. And unfortunately, people had used their vehicles to circle this clay pinnacle. And this is on the northern part of Lake Powell, just a beautiful place. Smoky Mountain Road. And the reason, I'll show you the reason they call it Smoky Mountain. Up at the top, the rocks have separated and moved outward. And we're in a part of the United States called the Basin and Range. We're right at the edge of Basin and Range, where you've got these horse and grobens. And the groben is the downfaulted part. And this is because the movement of the plates between the North American plate and the Pacific plate, there's a flexure in the boundary. So it's actually pulling the North American plate apart in Basin and Range. And I say, if you looked at this from space, it's like looks like a bunch of caterpillars finding their way from Mexico up into Nevada, because you have these basins and these ranges, which would be like the caterpillars. And there on the right is a picture of Basin and Range in Southern California. And there it is. This is a graben. This is a mini graben. I've never seen a cute little graben like this. But this one is at the top of Smoky Mountain Road. You can see that the part of the picture in the center there, the rocks have settled down, making this beautiful little graben structure. And the reason they call it Smoky Mountain is that below the surface, there are coal deposits, and those the coal got set on fire. My guess is it happened by lightning, and they have tried to put out the fires, and the Park Service has been unable to put these fires out. So if you go there in the wintertime, you can actually see smoke coming out of the ground because of these fires in the rock below. You'll see more of that a little bit later. So, Bryce, do you know what a yardang is? Bryce? I can't hear you. You're apparently muted for some reason. But
Aren't they? Yeah, aren't they sort of mini canyons carved longitudinally by wind?
You got it exactly 180 degrees out of phase. They stick up, and they form by the wind. This is along one of the roads. These are little structures where the sand has blown out up on the Indian reservation. Can you see the horse down on the left? Obviously, it's a toy horse that I put in there for scale, I guess. But the wind has blown out the sand between these ridges. They have been found in the Middle East, hence the name Yardang, and they're also found on Mars. And there's some great Yardangs on Edwards Air Force Base. And I read about them and said, well, gee, I'd like to see these. And I had befriended John S. Shelton previously. Bryce, have you heard of John S. Shelton?
Oh yes. Oh yeah.
Yeah, he was quite a guy. I visited him several times. He was kind of a hero of mine. He taught at Pomona College, died about 10 years ago. But I wanted to get there. So John had actually not heard about Yardangs. So I got in touch with Wes Ward, who was the head of the Western branch of the United States Geological Survey. And I said, Wes, there's some wonderful Yardangs on Edwards Air Force Base. Do you think you can get John Shelton there? Oh, he knew who John Shelton was. And by the way, can I come along? So we went to Edwards Air Force Base. I think the guy on the left was one of the officials of the Air Force Base. And they're classic Yardangs in this location. So, they're amazing. It was because of knowing Shelton and the fact he'd never seen one. He was interested in seeing it. So we got permission to go on Edwards Air Force Base. These are tessellated patterns, and there's space filling. You could do it with rectangles, you could do it with squares. If you do it with more than 6 sides, they will not fit together without making a space in between. And some of you may know where I'm going with this. These are basaltic columns. Here's Devil's Postpile National Park in California, and you're looking at the tops of these vertical postpile basaltic columns, columnar basalt. It's been smoothed off by glaciation in the Sierra Nevada. And here it is looking from the bottom. Both my pictures. It's an amazing place. They just break off and fall away. There are structures like this in Northern Ireland. There's some great structures. And Mike, do you know where the closest one is to you of columnar basalt?
Well, the Palisades, of course.
Bingo. Yeah, this is the same kind of structure as the Palisades Cliffs across from Manhattan.
They also have some of these in Iceland.
Yes, indeed they do. Yeah. So it's because of shrinkage of the lava, and it cracks into these vertical columns, which are really quite spectacular. And this is actually just north of the boundary of Cave Creek, as the crow flies, about 5 miles north of where I'm sitting. And those are lava flows in Sugarloaf Mountain. And those lava flows have broken into these kinds of columnar basalts. Not nearly as nice as what we saw in Devil's Postpile. And
Some
then
in
down below
Yellowstone too.
I beg your pardon?
There's some in Yellowstone too.
Yes. Thank you, Renee. You're right. And I have seen those. Down below, you've got the Chalk Canyon Formation because it's white like chalk. It's not chalk. It's volcanic ash. So this was a happening place 20 million years ago. And you've got these rocks that are 20 million years old resting directly upon rocks that are Proterozoic, 1.7 billion. So locally, we've got an unconformity. and you could take all of the bedrock of New York State and fit it into that unconformity. And I have a couple of places where I can put my thumb on the bottom one, my fingers in the same hand on the top one, and that's 1.7 billion years. Amazing unconformity. And there's some rocks up there that have fallen down, the basalt, and the basalt boulders show this shape of the columns. This is it. And this is a rock that I found up near Lake Powell. And Bryce may be able to help. I think it's shrinkage that created this pattern on the rock. What do you think, Bryce? He's looking.
What kind of rock is it?
I think it's a sandstone. And the best I can think of is, shrinkage has created it. It cracked, and it had to crack in the space-filling tessellated pattern.
Yeah, I've never seen anything like that.
Yeah. Well, come to Boulder, Utah, and you'll see a great one.
Hmm.
That's magnificent. It's kind of a famous place
Hmm.
in Boulder, Utah. Again, Grand Staircase, Escalante Grand Staircase National Monument. Just absolutely phenomenal location. Off the beaten path. Not many people go there. Now, this is a sill. It's not a dike. It's a sill. And as you'll know, a sill happens along the rock layers. So we generally think of a sill as being horizontal. This one's vertical. It's called China Wall because it's like the ruins of the Great Wall of China. And the reason that it's a sill is that this whole block, I don't know how many square miles, has been turned vertical by plate tectonic movements. It's Proterozoic, 1.7 billion years old, and this is one of the rock formations in which they got gold. Although they didn't get up here. It's a hell of a hike to get up there, but it's amazing. And our house is just over that mountain to the right, at the top of the picture. So it's punctuated along the landscape. It's a magnificent structure. I'm not sure I could even get up there anymore. I'll be 80 in May. And it's a tough walk to get up there. But this is an airplane view. A friend of mine had a little airplane. It was a performance airplane, so it flew perfectly well upside down and right side up, and we did that. But he took me over by China Wall, and I got this picture of China Wall from a distance. And you can see some trails going up there, and those are from the Desert Mountain Gated Community. And the Desert Mountain owns where the trail is, but they don't own most of China Wall. That's on federal land. But it's an amazing, and again, this is a sill. You get an idea looking at this. You kind of see that the rock layers are turned vertical. Doesn't show up really well in this picture. And some of you may have heard of a place called The Wave, and you've certainly seen pictures of it. You have to get permission to go in there. They have a lottery. It took me 4 times to win the lottery to go into The Wave to take that trail. It's a hard trail to follow. It's not well marked. Some of it's over slick rock. Elaine and I are pretty good at navigating slick rock, but if we hadn't seen people, we would not have made it to The Wave because it's just so tricky to find. But there it is. Have some of you seen pictures of this?
Hmm.
Bryce has. Yeah.
Yes.
It's just an amazing formation. But you can't just walk in there. You're actually walking in from a parking lot in Utah, and you go across the Arizona border on that trail to get up to The Wave. That's Elaine and me at The Wave. I had to kind of shoo people away in order to get this picture at the classic location of The Wave. And Lake Powell, one of the times I did Lake Powell, it was my little red canoe there. I had a little motor on the canoe, went 50 miles up Lake Powell. Death wish. Wind came up when I got to get to the edge of the shoreline. The shoreline was vertical rock, and there you get sinusoidal addition of the waves. So you're better out in the middle of Lake Powell. The waves aren't as bad as they are, but they're bouncing off the rock. Fortunately, I managed to find a cleft and get into shore, but that was a tremendous canoe ride. Never would do it again because it's extremely dangerous. In the
Do it with a
background,
kayak, it's easier.
yeah, kayak might do it, but Yeah, 50 miles is a long way to go, Mike. Would you be able to take enough supplies to do a 100-mile trip?
In my Pungo,
Okay, come on out and we'll do it. And that would get us to Rainbow Bridge. It's large enough that you could fit the US Capitol on underneath it. It's that tall. And then in the background, you have Navajo Mountain. And this little piece of real estate around Rainbow Bridge is federal land, but Navajo Mountain is on the Navajo reservation. Some people approach it in a trail coming over Navajo Mountain, but most of us do it on a boat going up Lake Powell. And Lake Powell is so low, it's about a mile walk to get up there. When Lake Powell is full, the reservoir goes right underneath the bridge. And I think when they made Glen Canyon Dam, they designed it so that Rainbow Bridge would not be obstructed by the water or weathered more than it would otherwise. Lake Powell has some amazing places. These are structures called weathering pit ridges, and taken there by a photographer for Arizona Highways, National Geographic, Gary Ladd. And he had excursions on Lake Powell in the houseboats. Really interesting way to get around. So these are called weathering pits. And this is one I discovered near Dance Hall Rock. I just stopped at Dance Hall Rock, wandered around over the Slick Rock, and there are these weathering pits all over the place. Now, the trees can't grow up on the surface because there's not enough water, but the water comes down into these pits, and there's enough water to get the trees. And my guess is that there's a pit there because the weathering by water, and it would sometimes be ice in the wintertime, breaks up the sandstone, and then the wind must blow it away. And I guess the wind must come in, swoop down into the bottom of the pit, and then blow the sand out. But they're beautiful structures. And that's Gary Ladd, published a number of books, as I said, National Geographic and Arizona Highways, taking a picture of a person who was on one of our trips. He is not standing at the top of a cliff. And you can see from the shadow, he is standing at the top of what we call Reflecting Pool Canyon. And there is a reflection of the opposite side of the canyon. And Gary got his picture. I think Gary probably published that picture. But good man, Gary Ladd. So when I went up there by canoe, I got most of the way up to Lagorce Arch and then had to walk the next half a mile to get there because Lake Powell was low. You can see the bath tub right up there. And see the rock over on the right, okay, middle right, and it's got a little knob up on the top of it. The next time I went there was on a houseboat with Gary, and right by the boat, that's the same rock. So Lake Powell goes up and down. The last couple of years, it's been about 1/4 to 1/3 full. The Colorado River is allocated up to 16.5 million acre feet a year, and it is producing more like 12 to 14 million acre feet a year. So that's why Lake Powell is way down. And now it's much lower, even than it was in that last picture. But that's the same rock in the two pictures, the same Lagorce Arch. Yeah. And this is near sunset, the boat with Gary Ladd and the group. And I've got a 30 by 40 of this up above in our family room. Taken with a super zoom camera. It wasn't an expensive camera, but got a nice picture. So this is a place that I somehow found online. It's called the Beastie Badlands, and it's northwestern New Mexico. And somewhere I saw a feature in here that you'll see shortly. And it was about a 3-mile, 4-mile walk to get up here. We would not have found the feature we wanted had we not seen some people that could direct us there. And the whole day, there was only one other hiking group that was in here because it's so remote, extremely remote. Smoky Mountain, we saw with the coal, caught fire and had the smoke coming out of the cracks near that mini Robin. And here there was coal that got on fire and baked the rock. It's my teaching colleague, Dennis Walsh, I was teaching in Somers with Elaine. We had good walk. A lot of beautiful petrified logs in that area. Very few people go here. They had a parking lot, and there was nobody in the parking lot. But this and the petrified wood is interesting because it shows the structure of the wood. My friend Russ is here. Russ and I are hiking partners. We've done some amazing hikes around Cave Creek. And this is some of the structure of the original wood. It's not colorful, but it certainly shows the wood structure. And the reason I wanted to go there was a location called the Cracked Eggs. And these are concretions, natural formations. And we had a tough time finding this. Somebody finally got us over there. I did not take GPS. I guess if I'd had GPS, we would have found it more easily, but we were lucky to find that other group there. And they said, oh, you just go 1/4 of a mile around this hill and that'll take you to the Cracked Eggs. And they're amazing structures. And this is another part, same area, the Cracked Eggs. What does that one on the lower left look like? Does it look like a frog or a lizard coming out of the ground? Okay, and apparently MC Escher liked that idea, and this is one of his drawings. So it's like the lizard coming out of the page of his artwork. So I'll go back, and there's the lizard coming out of the ground. It's another one of these concretions. But amazing, absolutely amazing spot. Now we're going to see some chemistry. This is again near Green River, Utah, and they were drilling for oil here, and they got down to a certain depth. Instead of getting oil, they intercepted an aquifer under pressure and had to abandon the oil well drilling, left the casing there, and it made a man-made geyser. So it's water coming up through the pipe that makes this geyser. This is not my picture, but here's Elaine looking down into that pipe, and the water coming out has a lot of dissolved iron-stained water, flows down into the Green River. Eventually it would go into the Colorado and the Sea of Cortez. And beautiful color.
Is it intermittent or continuous?
It's intermittent. It was, and I think somebody has probably dropped rocks down there and vandalized it. There's nobody that's within 10 or 15 miles of this location. So my guess is that it got vandalized and it has not been erupting in the last couple of decades. And John Wesley Powell would have gone past this when he did his famous expeditions from Green River. He went from Green River, Wyoming, I think, and through Green River, Utah, and would have gone right past this on his expeditions. Those on the Esprit listserv have seen this. This is a place where the Upper Snake River meets Deer Creek in the Rocky Mountains. And the Snake River, I'm not sure which is which, but the one in the background there comes out of an area where there's a lot of pyrite. And the pyrite iron sulfide changes to rust, iron oxide. The water coming in the clear stream is basic in nature. And when the two come together, you see that little brown section there where the two meet, go onto the road. This is another one that nobody knows about. Any of you know Annabella Foos, Foos? Any of you know her? She lives in New York. I think she lives in Ohio, and she's very active in NAGT. And she has published about this. One of the few people that has published about this. It's a natural chemical reaction. As you go downstream, the two streams mix, and you end up with a precipitate of aluminum that gives it this color. This is about a half a mile downstream. So it's a chemistry experiment in nature in the Rocky Mountains. Really, just an amazing place. As I said, I've never talked to anybody else who has ever been to this place except Annabella. And it's just a phenomenal chemical reaction. If you want to know what the chemistry is here, you start out with pyrite, and then you bring in some H2SO4, sulfuric acid, and end up with a rusty precipitate that includes aluminum sulfate. And I think it's the aluminum sulfate that gives that beautiful blue color. We saw some earlier, some water like that was coming from the solution of limestone, but this one is a chemical precipitate. And it's right near the Keystone ski area in the Rocky Mountains. So let's see, we're going to go to central remote part of California. Mono Lake is famous. You may have seen the movie Chinatown with Jack Nicholson, and it was about water in Los Angeles. And the city of Los Angeles came up into the Owens Valley, secretly bought land, and then made an aqueduct canal to take the water down to Los Angeles, and got the Owens Valley people really pissed off because they couldn't do agriculture anymore because it changed it into a virtual desert. In the middle of the picture, you can see a little volcano. And it's famous for these tufa towers. And these were formed underwater when the lake level was higher. You're looking at the eastern front of the Sierra Nevada mountains in the background. As a photographer, they're taking pictures of the tufa towers. And I think the only roads that go down to the lake are dirt roads. So that would be off the beaten path. But that's an absolutely amazing location. Again, these are my pictures. But when I retired at 55, it gave me a chance to climb the mountains and go to the places in the Southwest like this and the slot canyons, etc. In my opinion, the most underrated national park in the country is Death Valley. And most people go to these places like Furnace Creek and Scotty's Castle. They don't go to E, Eureka Dunes, the red letter. They don't go to S, which is Saline Valley. And they don't go to R, which is Racetrack Playa. Have some of you heard of Racetrack Playa? Yeah, of course, Bryce raised. Bryce, have you been there?
No.
No, it's an amazing place. Come on out and visit. We'll go to Racetrack Playa. These are Eureka Dunes, almost as high as the Great Sand Dunes National Monument in Colorado, but they're natural. These sand dunes often form in these desert valleys, and it's tough to climb up to the top of them. It's tough to get to some of these places because the roads are not great. You can do them in a Subaru. I'm not sure you want to take your Cadillac down these roads. But down these roads, you may get to Saline Valley. This is the S on the map. And you can see a little oasis down there. And it's an amazing little desert oasis. No camels down there. There's something better. So here's a close-up of that little oasis. And when I got to this point that a woman came wandering from the pool in there, the oasis pool, and completely naked. Now, and that's the way it happens here at Saline Valley. They've made these little pools. It has been incorporated into Death Valley National Park. The maps don't show anything special about this valley because most people don't go there, but people go there. I don't know if bathing suits are optional because nobody had a bathing suit. And I was younger in those days and didn't look quite the way I do now, approaching 80. But my story about this is there was a young woman there in the pool, built very nicely. And there were jets going over from China Lake. And those jets were circling lower and lower and lower. And she smiled and she said, "This is the least I can do for my country." That's partly true. And here's the Racetrack Playa that Bryce had learned about. Probably many of you have probably seen about this. Carla, there's a woman from New York that taught earth science. Can't remember, ended up at San Jose State University. And she gave names to these boulders that were out in the middle of the lake. And it was a mystery for many years what was moving these boulders. And I showed you pictures of John S. Shelton. John had an airplane, and he flew in one day, landed on the lake bed with his airplane, took out a jerry can of water, turned the airplane around by one of these rocks, put the jerry can there and wet the water by the rock, and then with the brakes on, made his airplane propeller blow a wind, and the rock didn't move a whit. So it really wasn't known until recently what caused these rocks to move across Racetrack Playa. But just within the last couple of decades, there was somebody there. It's a hell of a road to get in there. So that's a major reason people don't go there off the beaten path. And somebody went in and actually saw the rocks moving. And in a rain event, the Racetrack Playa gets covered with an inch or two of water. In the wintertime, it freezes as ice. And then these rocks are ice rafted. You can see a marker on the top of this one that was undoubtedly put there so that somebody could mark the GPS coordinates. This is not my picture. Yeah, but they finally figured out how it was that this happens. And unfortunately, it was not aliens like a lot of people thought. I don't think you guys are into aliens. Oh, maybe some of you are aliens. Regardless. Okay, let's go to the Salton Sea. The Salton Sea did not exist until 1904, 1906. And they were routing water into the Imperial Valley. And the bottom of Imperial Valley is about 200 feet below sea level. So the water is steeper going from Yuma into Imperial Valley than it is going down to the Sea of Cortez. So when they made the Alamo Canal, the canal floodgates broke, or entry gates, whatever you control gates, and the whole Colorado River rushed into Imperial Valley, making the Salton Sea. So of course they're irrigating the crops in Imperial Valley. A lot of your crops come from there. Some of it is used to grow alfalfa, and the alfalfa is sent. A lot of it is sent over to Saudi Arabia because they don't want to ruin their aquifer. So Fundamante owns or is renting land in Arizona, sucking out the groundwater in these closed depressions, growing alfalfa, and then shipping out to Saudi Arabia. Now, they're smart because they don't want to ruin their aquifer. And the politicians in Arizona are not so smart. Our friend is the Attorney General of Arizona, Chris Mays, is going after them. Their contract is good, but she's going after them with a nuisance lawsuit because people's wells who live near these valleys, in these valleys, are losing their water from their wells because it's being sucked up to grow alfalfa. And growing alfalfa in the desert doesn't make sense, but making money on it is something that our infamous state legislature has done. And fortunately, Kress, who's a Democrat, is going after them on a nuisance lawsuit because they're destroying the wells of people who are nearby. I hope it works, but you know that the Saudis are going to fight it in law. And this is Salton Sea desert shores. And when the water was higher and it was a recreational place, the people bought houses here. They built these little canals like going into the lots, and people could launch their boats there. But the Salton Sea is going down because they don't have as much water coming in from Imperial Valley, and it's bringing with it a lot of fertilizer from the fields. So the Salton Sea is no longer a recreational thing. It's really become, well, I think it's going to dry up. And if it dries up, it's going to be a toxic waste area where the wind blowing across the dry Salton Sea is going to pick up those chemicals and make places like Bombay Beach even more deserted. But Bombay Beach has been in the New York Times a couple of times. It's an artist colony along the Salton Sea. Most of the people that go there in the winter because in the summer, the average high temperature is well over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. But it's kind of a place for, artists to go. Really an amazing place. They have these gigantic sculptures there that people have made. So it's just an amazing place. Everybody's a little different than you and I are. Well, not so different from some of us. And that's Elaine and Aaron looking out over the Salton Sea, standing next to an iron sculpture along the bank. The sea has retreated quite a ways because it's drying up. But my office, this is my secondary office along the Salton Sea. Now, the sign over on the left says Bonolith. And that's in honor of Sonny Bono, who was the governor of California and tried to save the Salton Sea ecologically. I don't think it worked. Does anybody know what that pyramid was about? No? Somebody made this metal pyramid, put it somewhere up on the Colorado Plateau, and challenged people to find it. And it took over a year before anybody found it. So it was, you know, a really interesting piece of art. I don't know whether this is the original pyramid that was done there, or whether somebody just made one like it and put it there in the shallow water of the Salton Sea. But it's you know, one of these quirky things that is really cool. Now, there are not many places in the United States where you can camp along the edge of the sea, see the beautiful setting sun, and there is no one within miles along the edge of the sea, because this is the Salton Sea. Wouldn't want to camp there very much because the Salton Sea is heavily polluted, but it was a cool place to camp. You see my tent there. Usually I use the tent just to store things in, because I just sleep in the cot next to the car in most cases. It's very rare to get rain, even dew in the desert. Leonard Knight was someone who lived in New England and decided that he wanted a monument to Christianity. So he went to the Salton Sea area. Let's see, Shelburne Falls, Vermont. He was born there in 1931, and God is love. So he made this monument to Christianity, maybe all religions. This is a satellite view of Salvation Mountain, is what it's called. The first time that I went there, there was a busload of Japanese tourists. Now, what could be more American than Salvation Mountain? They don't charge anybody to stop there. I mean, it's really remote. But they said, you know, when you come back, we're not all that concerned about money. You bring paint. So the second time I went back, I had half of a 5-gallon barrel, 5-gallon bucket of paint that we'd used in painting our house. And I gave it to them, and I said, you know, this is kind of a dull brown color, like the sand. You know, why would you want this? And the answer was one word: undercoat. So they wanted the paint so they could do an undercoat on the clay. And that was in order to build this monument to Christianity. Say, Jesus, I am a sinner. Please come upon my body and into my heart. God is love. You know, just amazing. They just painted this clay hill. And I don't even know if they had permission to do it. You know, they just did it. You know, it's out in the middle of the desert on federal land. It's right next to a settlement called Slab City. And Slab City is so named because there was a military base here during World War II. And they built the military base on these concrete slabs. And it was very quickly decommissioned, but the slabs are still there. So it became a place for people to boondock. And that's a verb. And boondocking means that you go out in the desert and you just camp there. And so people boondock at Slab City. Again, not my picture. And the last time I was there, I went there with their daughter and was taking some pictures. And she said, Dad, we've got to get out of here. These people really don't want us here. So I took a couple more pictures and we left. But this must be a view from a drone. But that's Slab City. And these people mostly come there in the wintertime. And they live probably off the grid, and they live their alternate lifestyle, somewhat similar to Bombay Beach, which is not far away. Now, these are mountains near the Salton Sea, and lava flows are very seldom this kind of color. Well, it's not a lava flow. It's a mud flow. And it's coming because near the Salton Sea, there's springs that bubble up mud, and it's created these mud volcanoes. It's a natural feature. Tough to get to that. Now that I think they've got it fenced off. But it used to be you could just walk over there. Just an amazing place. And here's what caused them. These are my pictures. And it's the water coming up through the soil. They've now discovered a lot of lithium. So I think they're going to be doing lithium mining there for the electronics computer industry. And there's also geothermal plants along the Salton Sea. And also there's a place called Obsidian Points, and I picked up some gigantic pieces of beautiful obsidian from there. Not far from there in Southern California is the center of the world, not the center of the earth. This is the center of the world. And that's a sundial. And the gnomon of the sundial is the hand of God. And there he is from the Sistine Chapel, the hand of God. The guy there must be somebody who was at Saline Valley in one of the tubs. And it's pointing toward a little pyramid that I'll talk about later. But behind that are granite panels. And this was done by a guy who made a mint of money, went to Princeton, then he was a paratrooper in the Marines, and then he manufactured parachutes for the military and made a lot of money. And this is how he's using his money to create the town of Felicity, named after his wife. And these panels are dedicated to the history of the world, and each panel represents something different. Bear with me a moment here. Let's see. Paper. So they're each panel. There's one of them, the history of the United States. Okay, here we go. History of the world in granite, and it includes Hinduism, Zapote of central Mexico, native religion, Buddhism, the birth of Jesus, Attila the Hun, Pythagorean theorem, the history of California, the behavior of the walrus. And each one of these granite panels is carved to be that. And then they got the church up on the hill. He created the hill. And off to the left is a maze that he created. And he doesn't charge anything for people that come there. Unless you want to go into this building, which is the center of the world. I'll explain that shortly. And these are some of his granite panels that he's had made. And he has an amazing number of them. I'll go back to one of the earlier slides. And you can see those long things there are these granite panels representing the history as Jean-Jacques Estelle sees it. And again, not my picture. This is the guy. That's his wife, Felicity. So he incorporated this little museum, whatever you want to call it, into to become the town of Felicity. So he's the mayor of Felicity. He probably won by a vote of 2-0. And it has been designated by the county as the center of the world, because for $2, you can go into that pyramid and there's a plaque there. And his wife, Felicity, has written children's books about Ko, who's the good dragon at the center of the world. So they decided that they would make this plaque as the center of the world in the middle of the desert, about 10 miles west of Yuma, Arizona. And finally, coming back to the Phoenix Valley, this is one of the few spots that's not really off the beaten path. It's along Interstate 101. And one of the farms made this. Now, the guy these are cutouts, probably plywood. The guy in the tractor is about actual size. So the two adults on either side are probably 10 feet tall. And then the baby is gigantic. And this was just done as a joke, creative joke by the people who own some of that farmland. You can see one of the pumps there that's sucking groundwater out of the desert valley. And a number of these places are in this publication called Atlas Obscura. And the New York Times called it a wanderlust wedding cabinet of curious places on paper. It's an amazing, and they have a page online, and you can look up places even in New York State. They would have places. So if you go online and do New York Atlas Obscura, it will probably tell you about some really interesting spots that most people wouldn't visit. So I give honorable mention to Rock Garden at Sunny Slope here in Phoenix, the Goldwater statue downtown. It's a statue of Barry Goldwater. There are falls on an irrigation canal in Phoenix because the canal is too steep. So they have to have a waterfall. The Mystery Castle, which is made of stone like the Bishop Castle, you see at the beginning, unfortunately it's closed. Castle Hot Springs is an expensive resort that's out in the boonies. A lot of people go in by helicopter. And Roadside America is another book that shows some of these unusual places. You've already seen my presentation, Arizona's Water, and I did an armchair geology tour of the Jewel of the Creek, working on one, Cave Creek, the creek from the source to the sea, and the geology of Cottonwood Canyon. And some of you have seen my earth science books that were written for New York. One of the people who reviewed them said, Tom, if this is a book for Regions Earth Science, why are there so many pictures of Arizona? And my response was one word, guilty. So that's the presentation. That's my love affair with the Southwest.
Okay. Thank you. That was very interesting.
Yeah, this is why I'm in love with the Southwest.
Thank you very much, Tom.
I've been